and thank you for joining us today for today's CapsimInbox Pilot Pass webinar, Getting to Know CapsimInbox Business Information Systems. My name is Matthew Schell, Market Development Manager here at Capsim, where I assist all of our authors on the academic and the corporate side with creating these very micro simulations. Now, for those of you that may not be aware of our Pilot Pass initiative, this is a program we've been doing for each month of the 2021 year, where we want to put a spotlight on one of our CapsimInbox micro simulations. Some of these were developed as far back as 2019. Some are just about to be released, like the one we're going to be focusing on today, which is particularly interesting because our CapsimInbox Business Information Systems will be ready for release in just 6 days' time. So if you'd like to implement this in your courses for the fall to see if it's a good fit, all you got to do is get in contact with us after today's webinar, and we'll give you completely free access to your own demo account and as many student licenses you'd like to try it out. Now, of course, today I'm joined with my colleague, Kelsey Zimmerman, who will kind of walk us through a couple of the sample emails and the experience. And I'm excited to introduce you all to Dr. Bernie Farkas, Assistant Professor of Information and Technology Management at the University of Tampa and author of CapsimInbox Business Information Systems, or BIS for short. Kelsey, Bernie, how you both doing today?
Doing
Doing
fine.
great.
Excellent. Fantastic. Now, what we'll be covering over the next 30 to 40 minutes or so we'll start off with giving you a very top level overview of what we try to achieve with this version, the topics that we hit on, a bit about the fictional student role and company. And then from there, I'll hand it off to Kelsey, who will take us through a couple sample emails directly in platform. So that way you can not only see some of the content of this micro simulation, but also the user interface as well, if this is your first time seeing CapsimInbox. After we've had a chance to review that, I'll take you through some of the post-simulation resources as well as the reporting metrics that come out at both the student level and what it looks like from the admin side. And then the latter half of today's presentation, it'll really be more of a back and forth between Dr. Farkas and myself. We'll explore why he decided to create business information systems, if he had any particular goals in mind. And then of course, we'll wrap today's presentation with a Q&A session. So if at any point you have any questions that you'd like to have answered, feel free to submit them in either the chat or questions tab that you see on screen, and we'll be sure to get to those at the end. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So first things first, what exactly is CapsimInbox Business Information Systems? So basically, this is going to be our newest version of Inbox released. I've had the pleasure of working on this with Bernie for quite some time now. And what we wanted to do was make a really immersive experience where the student takes the role of a store manager who's in charge of operations and management of a company's incubator store. Now, as far as the fictional company that we set this in, Bernie created a company called Swears, a traditional community-based household goods retailer that you could think of kind of akin to a Target or a Walmart these days. Now, what's particularly interesting with Swears is that they're starting to fall behind in terms of their market share with the rise of e-retailers like Amazon, for instance. So they're really trying to innovate their company as quickly as possible. So they're looking to try to accelerate some tech innovations and try to test them out at your incubator store. Now, in terms of the format of this micro simulation, like all CapsimInbox versions, this is entirely web-based and entirely self-directed. It's as simple as the students logging on, they go through a brief onboarding process, and then they'll go ahead and jump right into the micro simulation experience. What's particularly interesting about business information systems is we've actually put a little bit of a checkpoint in between the two sections, giving the student a little bit of time to process what's going on within the company. So that way, if you want to say have this as a homework assignment, 2 days within a given week or at different parts of your course, or if you just want to have them go through both right after the other, you have the option to do that. But students will be allotted with 45 minutes per section to complete this experience. So about an hour and a half total, but we're seeing completion times of about roughly 45 minutes to an hour so far. Now, in terms of the skills that we're looking to evaluate in this version, we're putting a particular emphasis on the ability for students to recognize issues, to identify stakeholders, discover key facts, propose solutions, and evaluate consequences. And overall, the scenarios and the situations that they're going to encounter really are seeking to measure their basic information systems knowledge and terminology, and really hit on a variety of topics like data integrity, the importance of personally identifiable information, intellectual property, data privacy, as well as security requirements. So really, it's a process of them kind of interacting with different stakeholders to not only identify the issues, but promote the correct solutions, and then see the consequences of their actions in real time. And one final note I'd like to make in terms of the scope, what to expect from this version. I would like to make clear that this business information systems version is not for those heavily steeped within intro to technology or information technology or information systems. Rather, Dr. Farkas and Capsim really work towards making this applicable to anybody in the business curriculum. Really, our main focus here is we want to show the kind of interactions between business information systems and, of course, how a manager would run their business. So with that, a quick 30,000-foot view of the CapsimInbox Business Information Systems version. At this point, I'll go ahead and hand it off to my colleague, Kelsey, who will take us through some actual examples of the simulation directly in platform. Kelsey, I hand it over to you right now. Kelsey, I think you might be muted.
1 second.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, just fine.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep, everything's pulling up just fine.
Great, fantastic. Hi, everybody. So as Matt mentioned, I'm going to give you a quick overview. This is a mini version of the business information business systems inbox. So I'd like to highlight one particular storyline which confronts the participant with a possible data breach. So upon entering the inbox, the participant is approached regarding several parallel storylines. In this first example, they're being asked to weigh in on some details regarding app development. But as you can see, as they're answering questions related to this topic, they're being approached and they're being alerted to some possible data privacy issues. The first one involving a denial of service attacks. There's some issues with some suspicious logins, as well as some concerns regarding malware. So it starts off with some colleagues notifying them of this, but they're being updated as the situation progresses. They're getting some more information regarding what's happening as their colleagues do a little bit more digging. This issue escalates and culminates in the participant being asked to weigh in on how exactly to deal with this data breach, how the participant responds to this data breach, so they're getting some malware updates, how they respond basically helps gather the skills in recognizing issues as well as discovering facts. So I know you all appreciate me leaving you guys on a little bit of a cliffhanger. How's the person going to handle this data breach? But I hope this was helpful in giving you a peek into the inbox itself and what types of situations the participant will experience throughout the simulation. As I mentioned, this is just one storyline within the inbox, and all the scenarios together create an experience that's really realistic for the participant. From there, I'm going to pass it back over to Matt, who'll provide a little bit more detail on the feedback report, as well as the information we share with the participants on their overall performance. Matt?
Thank you very much, Kelsey. Much appreciated. And what's really important to note about CapsimInbox is that we really did try to, mimic the Outlooks and Gmails that we use on a day-to-day basis. Instantly makes it relatable and very familiar to the student, and they can really, feel as if they're in the driver's seat, in that manager's decision position, basically. And as you can see that while they are multiple choice responses, Dr. Farkas did an excellent job of providing several different nuanced responses that can sometimes be a head scratcher where you don't know exactly how to respond to certain issues, but even the slightest difference can lead to some very interesting outcomes. But as Kelsey mentioned, what I can do now is I can kind of take you through the post-simulation reports, both what the student will see as well as what you as an administrator will see or professor. So first and foremost, once a student completes CapsimInbox Business Information Systems, they are of course prompted, you have completed the simulation. And immediately upon exiting the simulation, they are provided with this instantaneous and individualized feedback report. And what you're seeing on screen right now is the 4 primary metrics of feedback that we provide to all students. First and foremost, we want to show the students' overall performance by percentile against the general populace of those that have gone through the simulation prior. And I'm happy to say that this is one of our most rigorously tested versions where we've tested this with well over 180 students at the University of Tampa. Gotten a lot of great feedback from them as well. So we're starting with an excellent sample group that will continue to grow over time. Now, secondly, we also provided them a developmental index. And what really this is speaking to is, did the student pick the most proficient, not necessarily correct or incorrect or true or false, but the most efficient response to a given email? And then we also put that on a matrix with their consistency. Was it inconsistent or consistent in that proficiency throughout the exercise? And then one component in the onboarding that we've yet to mention is that the students do actually complete a self-assessment, where given the skills in this version, they'll be able to put themselves in a percentile from 0 to 100 against their peers. And then what we ultimately do is we take those perceived skill values and we compare them directly to their results in the inbox simulation based on percentile performance data. And what you'll see in the bottom left of the screen is that self-awareness gauge is on a scale of 0 to 6, where higher scores would indicate that one's perceived skills are much closer to reality, where a lower skill could indicate, or a lower score could indicate perhaps they're over or underestimating their current capabilities. And then finally, we also have the skill gaps that we want to visualize. So not only do we chart out where the students self-assess, but we want to show where the inbox assessment placed them at as well. That way, we can not only identify their key strengths, but really hone in on which areas are most need for improvement for that student. And as many of you may know from previous pilot pass webinars, if you've joined us before, is that really we do frame CapsimInbox as a developmental tool. A lot of simulations will just have them go through it, they get their feedback, and that's where it ends. But with any of our simulations, and including the one that Dr. Farkas has made for us here, we really wanted to put an emphasis on the developmental component. So the student will not only have access to developmental tactics written by the author, but they'll also have the ability to create an individual development plan as well. That way they can take the feedback, take the developmental tactics, and make an actionable plan to improve their skills over time. And in fact, one of the most common ways we see CapsimInbox utilized is in a pre and post test setting, where perhaps they go through it at the beginning of the course to kind of assess where their knowledge is at, particularly in like intro level courses. And then perhaps they could do it again at either the end of the course or even at the end of the entire curriculum. That way we can show the empirical longitudinal development of those skills at the individual level, at the cohort level, or even at the institutional level. And we'll talk a little bit further in just a second about some of the additional supporting documents that Dr. Farkas helped us design, really to make professors such as yourselves that much more successful in implementing this solution. But one final thing before I introduce Dr. Farkas a bit further is I wanted to introduce you to the administrative dashboard. And just like the student experience, we want to make this as intuitive and as user-friendly as possible. So it's as simple as you logging in at capsim.com, you go to your course, and then you'll pull up your dashboard, which you see on screen here, and immediately you're going to be provided with some excellent information on the group's averages against the general populace, the averages for each of the skills that we're assessing compared to the general populace. And then of course, at the bottom, you're gonna have your roster where you're gonna look at all of the individual student results, everything from their percentile scores, self-awareness levels, when did they complete the assessment, how long did it take them, and if and when they created an IDP, an individual development plan, which the professor can of course access, view, and provide feedback on. So all in all, a great experience. And in fact, we see a lot of professors that'll actually use the individual development plan as a means for grading as well, based on what kind of effort the student put into their own development. But now that we've gone over a 30,000 foot view of the business information systems version, we've seen a couple sample emails and we've looked at the reporting metrics provided. At this time, I'd be happy to introduce our author, the man of the hour, Dr. Bernie Farkas. What I'd like to do is just kind of give you a little bit of insight into Bernie's background, both on an academic and the corporate front, some of the key courses, and then I'll quickly summarize the scenario one more time before we get into some initial questions for him. So, as stated, Dr. Farkas is the Assistant Professor of Information and Technology Management at the University of Tampa's John H. Sykes College of Business. He also has previous teaching experience at Virginia Commonwealth University and the University of Phoenix. And outside of academia, he also has quite a plethora of corporate expertise in both consulting experience as well and including project management, where he's assisted a lot of high-profile software, financial, and government institutions. And as far as the courses that Bernie's taught over the years, there are quite a few of them, but just to highlight a few of them, of course, BIS has been his primary focus, data communications, e-business, and human factors in technology. In terms of his educational background, he got his doctorate at Business Information Systems at Virginia Commonwealth University and his master's in management of technology at NYU's Tarden School of Engineering. As far as a quick synopsis of business information systems, again, we're looking at the student taking the role of a store manager at Squares, that Target-esque equivalent big box retailer. And they're going to be responding to all different sorts of decisions related to technology's role in Square's business. And the student's going to be challenged to really adhere to the company's policies and their code of ethics. And a quick overview of the topics, we covered data integrity, PII, intellectual property, data privacy, and security requirements. And the skills, again, that we're evaluating will be recognizing issues, identifying stakeholders, discovering facts, proposing solutions, and evaluating consequences. But enough from mine at this point. At this point, I'd be happy to introduce you all to Dr. Bernie Farkas. Bernie, how are you doing?
Doing good. Nice to see you, Matt,
Nice to see
and
you as well.
everyone here.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I guess first things first, Bernie, I think the question that I figured we'd start with is, why did you decide to create CapsimInbox Business Information Systems? Was there a particular driver that led you to this?
Yeah, at UT, I'm the course coordinator for our introductory MIS class that is required for every student in the college as part of their bachelor's degree. So we have generally a class of 30 students. If I have 2 students that are in the MIS program, it's a lot. So I have generally 20. In fact, I have 28 students who really don't want to be there and are really petrified that we're going to make them become programmers or database designers or network security experts, which is not the intent of the class. So I thought um, it's really important for these students to understand more about how they're going to be using technology to be successful in their career, which is just a fact today. When I started, technology wasn't so prevalent in the business. Today, it's just a cornerstone to how every organization operates. And there's no real good way to give them textbook reading and question and answer tests and other kinds of things to get them into the situation of how do you figure out doing doing the decisions necessary to work with technology. So I was watching a Capsim demonstration with our management department, and it just seemed like building a simulation was the coolest way to get students involved in this critical area that they're going to need to develop regardless of what their future holds.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that, Bernie. Would you say that when you decided to create the simulation, are there a lot of other, either sim-based or even just generally experiential learning solutions out there for this type of topic at the moment?
I wish I looked for simulations that I could use, that I could leverage, and I couldn't find anything. And then I started looking for tools I could use to build them, and I could have done something in PowerPoint and would have taken a ton of work, and I could have gotten some programmers together and could have built something, would have taken a ton of work, and then I found Capsim and answered my problems. So I think this is a unique thing where, for the most part, IT and IS has been just that black box thing that we got to deal with, but we can ignore. And now it's as important for students to understand as accounting and finance and marketing, which is where most of the simulations exist at present.
Nice. Is there anything in particular, Bernie, would you say that, like from your perspective, that directly benefits both the student and the professor separately with this type of simulation?
So as you mentioned, we've done dry runs with the pilot runs with the simulation in several of our classes, and I talked to a lot of the students after they've completed it. They all are impressed with how real it feels to them. In fact, the last time I did it, just like 3 weeks ago, the class was complaining about how fast things were coming at them, and they didn't have time to think and research and come up with answers, which is what students are used to, right? A professor gives an assignment, you got a week, you can go figure it out, and you can turn it in. And in business, you get an email in and the boss wants an answer in 20 minutes. So you don't necessarily get a chance to do solid research and come up with what it is. Or if you're a consultant, you get invited in to your client or your prospect and they lay out a problem, and 45 minutes later, you're supposed to respond with what you think is the approach that should be taken. There's no time to do research. So students are being asked to evaluate things fairly quickly, but at a reasonable pace, and respond. And then they're being asked to respond to the responses that they generated, which is more my experience anyway, my 40-year experience in business is what happens. So students are getting an experience that is more like what they're going to encounter when they get out of school and into the career and start working, and they're seeing in real world what critical thinking skills and critical analysis skills are and how they use them. For a professor, you're getting a self-contained tool that exposes students to these issues of working with technology, but not of technology. But there's flexibility in there to tailor it to meet the needs of your course and your learning outcomes. So yeah, I think it benefits both professors and students nicely.
Excellent. And then I guess as a final question for this section, Bernie, what courses would you think that this microsim would be best suited for outside of course, business information systems, or perhaps maybe how you were mentioning how you're planning on implementing it at the University of Tampa?
So when I started this journey, it was for an introductory information systems course, to put in a tool, an assignment that students can understand how technology is used in business, right? But the way it evolved over time, the simulation is really good at in a project management course. There's a lot of project management situations in it that are helpful in teaching those kinds of concepts. There's from a security governance perspective, it's touching on those issues also, and stakeholder management and trying to set up governance and setting up security response plans. It could also work in a management course. Again, you're being given certain scenarios and you're trying to work through the organization to satisfy the different needs of the organization. So I think it has application in a variety of courses.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that insight, Bernie. Much appreciated. At this time, what I thought I'd do is I thought I'd show them what we've been working on in terms of the developmental tactics as well as the instructor notes to really kind of help them with get an idea of what kind of supporting documents come alongside this. So I'll kind of briefly describe those, Bernie, but if you have any insight or anything you'd like to share with those, feel free to add as well. To that point, though, what we found over the course of creating inboxes over the years has been it's not just about creating a well-crafted experience and providing good feedback, but we need to be able to provide supporting documents that will help, make implementation as smooth as possible. Because there is so many different outcomes in these given situations, given the threading logic between different emails and how things can branch off, it almost has a digital choose your own adventure aspect. So what we did was we worked with Dr. Farkas to create some pretty expansive developmental tactics for each of the different skill areas that we're looking to assess within this version. And this is all framed within the concept of ethically informed decision making. So as you can see on screen, just a couple examples for like recognize issue and evaluating consequences. We're stating the problem, how you can actually practice, implementing these in either an academic or a corporate atmosphere, and then some practical tips and tricks, as well as additional resources to really aid them post simulation. In fact, a lot of the times we see these used as kind of the foundation or the bedrock for students to create their individual development plans, whether they're going to have a post test or not. And then secondly, to quickly describe the instructor notes, this is an additional document unique to business information systems where we provide some additional information from Dr. Farkas, including an overview of what the simulation seeks to achieve, several different exterior resources should you like to provide them to the student after the fact, direct inbox information regarding the scenario, possible outcomes, things of that nature, and then some additional grading approaches as well. Bernie, by chance, anything you'd like to add to these two documents that you've created?
Yeah, so when we were designing the simulation, the initial thought was, since it's for a general business population, is I think it's really important that tomorrow's business leaders think about the use of technology and its ethical dimension. So what is the ethical implications of the use of a technology or the way we want to exercise something. So the simulation sits on top of a code of ethics for the organization, and the decisions we're asking them to make incorporate the code of ethics for them to use. So it's very much present there. But the foundational skill set that they need to use are critical thinking skill set, which is what you saw in the developmental document, and it's a fairly universal framework on how to attack a problem and come up with the choice that you want to use to implement a solution. So these documents are there to help people understand those skills and to nurture them. The teaching support document is to provide the professor support, because may not be familiar with all the different things that get touched upon. So the external resources are places where you can get more information about the technology that's being used and what's in each. There's many little scenarios within the simulation. So what's going on in each one and what should you be looking for, which can help you if you depend upon the approach you choose to grading. And then the grading section came about because the simulation really doesn't have a right answer. There is no one true path that goes through it. There's only the path that the student picks and the choices that they made to get to the end. And so this can't be graded like a test where there's, you got 100% of the answers correct or 50% of the answers correct. So you need to think about how you want to incorporate the use of simulation in your course from a grading perspective. So the grading approach section lists different approaches you can use for incorporating the simulation in your overall course design.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we'll come back to a little bit more of the grading component when we get to the Q&A section. I've got a question for you there as well, Bernie. You had mentioned a little bit earlier when you were piloting this with your students and everything that a lot of them were, asking you like, hey, or telling you, hey, everything's coming at me at once, which is very indicative of the real world. How would you say that their overall feedback was in the experience, just generally speaking?
Oh no, they're all very enthusiastic and enjoyed it. They found it, which is interesting. These are undergraduate students, right? They're some of them may have worked part-time. Actually, a couple of them had their own company, but for the most part, they have very little business experience. And they would tell me how they thought it was very realistic, how they thought it was more like what they would expect after they graduate. But I received nothing but praise about the experience, and of course there were suggestions about how to improve things or a question that they didn't quite understand that we went back and fixed. But the overall experience was overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I can speak a little bit to that further as well from our own internal review process. For those of you that are not aware, that any CapsimInbox that we create at Capsim goes through a thorough subject matter expert review to get feedback from people with direct experience on these topics from other universities or from a corporate atmosphere. And then additionally, we do run pilots as well in order to establish our primary sample group and to collect feedback from students in the process. And I could say that from both the subject matter expert reviewer perspective as well as some of the other pilots that we've conducted outside of the University of Tampa, that this has been one of our most well-received versions thus far. And in fact, I'm happy to say too that outside of just our own Capsim clients, that we've gotten a lot of industry recognition from some third parties as well. In fact, I'm happy to say that just over the last 16 months or so, we've received several accolades around the CapsimInbox platform, going back to last year, where we were chosen for the EdTech Awards for the Trendsetter, Best Product or Service Setting a Trend, and then the Cool Tool winner for the Best Professional Skills Solution. And we were really excited last December when we were surprised with 2 gold medals from Brandon Hall Group in 2020 for the Best Advance in Gaming or Simulation Technology, and in fact, the Best Advance in Content Authoring Technology for the very CapsimInbox authoring platform that Dr. Farkas utilized to create the simulation. So if any of you out there would ever like to take a shot at creating your own simulation or perhaps work with Capsim, feel free to let us know. We'd be happy to talk with you. And this actually continued in 2021 as well, where we picked up the Cool Tool Award for the Corporate Training Solution for this year too. So very excited to see where the future brings us and excited to see where business information system goes from here. Now, before we start to wrap up today's session, I wanted to give you all a chance to submit any questions in the chat or within the questions box there through GoToWebinar, and we'll get to those in just a second. But in the meantime, if you'd like to connect with us, if you'd like to try this solution for yourself and see if it's a good fit for your course, you can connect with us one-on-one for a walkthrough where we can take you through it in much more depth than today's webinar. We'll also be providing the recording of today's session along with a PDF version of the presentation deck that we just went through. And as you can see, there's a hyperlink right here on the final slide that will allow you to go directly to a registration page and make your own account. But you can also do this as well with connecting with anyone at Capsim. They'll be able to set you up with an account very quickly. And then, of course, if this is a good fit, you can pilot it with any of your students. We're happy to try this with as many students as you'd like. And we've got our contact information on the right side of the screen here for both Kelsey and myself. And Dr. Farkas was generous enough where if you have any questions for him directly, he'd be happy to respond to those as well. So I figure what we'll go ahead and do here is just give it a couple more seconds to see if we have any questions or anything popping into the chat. And then we'll go ahead and get started. So maybe just about 10 seconds or so. Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started here. Got a couple of more general inbox questions, and then I see some popping in for business information systems specifically. Let's go ahead and start with the business information systems ones. Dr. Farkas, I know we talked about a couple different smaller implementations, but a general question, how would I use this in my class? Any thoughts there?
I've actually been experimenting with that very question in my own class during the pilots. And I've ended up using it in my class as an experience of what it's like to work with information systems and be a member of a team implementing information systems. And so I have the students, I spend time prepping the simulation with the students in a conversation about working with technology, implementing it. What are some of the things that get considered? They do the simulation, and then we talk about, we do a debrief afterwards where we talk about the situations, the choices, the outcomes of their choices, and we work through it that way. Other ways it could be used as just an assignment, particularly for the first simulation is a lot about choices and how to make how to decide on what technology tools are going to be implemented in the store. What are the trade-offs? One point in the simulation, they could choose to bring robot concierge service into the store, and they get told by finance that if they do that, they have no money to do anything else. So they have to decide what they want to do there. Should they go forward with just the one, or should they think about recommending that be pushed off to a future project, future initiative? So there's different scenarios that can happen. The other thing that's in it to think about in position in the class is every one of the sub scenario ends with a open-ended question where we ask the student to provide a written explanation for why they're making the recommendation they're making. What's your reasoning? How can I justify this for the CEO, or in every single case? So there is the opportunity to include that in a course for students to demonstrate their critical thinking expertise, to demonstrate their pressure writing expertise, right? Skills. So that lots of different ways that it can be used.
Absolutely. And I guess kind of an extension of that question a bit, Bernie. We had a question, where would I put this within the semester? So like earlier I was alluding to, it could be something as easy as a homework assignment, just to kind of provide a practical experience. We see pre and post test use. Anything there that you'd like to add?
I use it to the end of the semester as a culminating experience after we've spent the semester talking about working with technology and the different kind of technology concepts. But it can easily be used in the beginning as a tease. This is what it's going to be like to work with technology. Here's some of the situations. It could be paired in the middle of in the semester with a particular section of your course, so that the simulation can reinforce that particular module that you're doing. So I think it can be used in various places through the semester. It doesn't take a large amount of time to use. so it's easily fit in.
Fantastic. And then a question I have for you directly, Bernie, and this kind of goes back to when we were talking about the instructor's notes and dev tactics. How would you grade it? Any particular insight there?
Yeah, so there's multiple ways to think about grading it. Again, as I said earlier, there is no right answer to this in the simulation. There is the answer you pick and then the consequences of that answer. And then some of the answers that they may choose, the simulation may come back with pushback to the student about that choice and ask them to reconsider. But even in those circumstances, they can still choose to stick the course of their choice, and go through. So I don't think that this is one of those binary grading kinds of things where if you got this this choice then you get this grade. So what I've recommended is you can use the Capsim's tools in the dashboard that Matt showed you a little earlier. And one way is you can grade the students against the other students and how well they did in one of the three metrics that Capsim provides, and just give a ranking, and give a grade that way. A second way is you can look at the student's skills assessment and you can rank how well they demonstrated their use of particular skills. Another approach is you can look at the written assignments and do the grading based upon how well you think they're expressing what went into making their decisions. And then finally, you could take the simulation and simply incorporate it into a source material into another assignment. I do that in my executive MBA class. We do a simulation and there's no grade for the simulation, but they end up writing a security breach plan that the simulation feeds the experience into that. And this would be ideal for an assignment pairing like that.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Bernie. And then we just got a couple of questions here, more general inbox related, and then I do have one closing question for you. Really quick, we have a question from the audience. Does Capsim have a product manager for Capsim Inbox product? Absolutely. And we'd be happy to get any feedback that you have on the version. We want to make these as best as possible. In fact, very often the way that I interact with the authors is, we take the user feedback, we take, hey, we'd like to have this topic focused on, hey, I think that we could expand this into this key area here, and then I provide that feedback to the author, and then we can work on that for the next iteration of this version. Another question from the audience, is the inbox customizable? So with any of the publicly available versions, including business information systems, these are going to be pretty much set in place. However, if you did want to create your very own, we do have the option to do that with our authoring platform, and you can connect with me directly if you'd like to have that conversation. One question I didn't see that come up, but I did figure I would clarify as well around pricing. We are going to provide access to this micro simulation at only $9.99 per student, so just under $10. And then if you wanted to implement it in a pre and post test setting, we would do that for $14.99, or just under $15 per student. So basically second use half off there if you'd like to integrate it. However, as noted, this is for our pilot pass now. If you get in contact with us during this month, any point you'd like to try it in the semester, we'd be happy to give you free access to see if it's a good fit. At this point, happy to take any final questions, but in the meantime, I do have one question for you, Bernie, from myself. If you wanted everyone watching today to take away one thing from either Inbox generally or from your version, Business Information Systems, what would you say it would be?
So for business information systems, it's not about the technology. It's about interacting and working with technology as a tool. I jokingly talk to my colleagues in our information technology management department frequently about how if you were alive in 1895 when Thomas Edison first electrified houses in Lower Manhattan, you had to know what kind of electricity you had so that you could go get the right kind of toaster or the right kind of light bulb. Today, we go to Walmart or we go to Amazon or any place we want, and we pick out any electrical device we choose, and we come home and we plug it in, and I don't think anybody thinks about the load factor on the circuit. Most might happen is somebody thinks about, oh, I'm going to go to Europe, so I need to have an adapter. technology is moving to that space very rapidly where we use technology, we don't understand the details of technology, and that's what this simulation is about. How do you make the decisions as a business to best make use of the technology? What are the consequences? What are the things you have to think about in order to implement technology to best serve the business's needs and to best serve your customers? And that's what this is. I wrote it. I wrote it based upon my years of running projects for many organizations, and so the dialogue in the emails is very much like emails that I've received on projects, and some of the issues that were raised from areas are exactly issues that were raised in similar situations. So it's as real as I could make it without actually making it based on something that actually occurred. So it's trying to prepare students for what they're going to encounter, because the satisfying stakeholders to make a change in organization is always a path full with unforeseen obstacles and unforeseen compromise, and that's what this is about.
Excellent, and very well said, Bernie. And thanks again for participating in today's webinar to really tell your side of the story and how we developed this tool. With that does conclude today's Pilot Pass webinar on CapsimInbox Business Information Systems. I'd like to thank you all for your time to join us today, and we'll be in touch very shortly with both the PDF version of this deck as well as a recording if you'd like to share it with any of your colleagues. And we look forward to hearing from many of you that might want to try this during the fall semester. So thank you again for all of your time, and have a great day.